Welcome to the Supporters Fund, Ask an Investor. I'm your host, Jeffery Potvin. And let's please welcome Jacques-Alexandre Gerber, Agave Partner Capital, as our investor today. Welcome, Jacques. It's a real pleasure to have you join us today.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Pleasure meeting you, and thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you here, man. There's so many great things that you've done over your career, and I love just unpacking all this great stuff. So we're going to jump right into it. And the best way for us to jump in is if you could share a little bit about your background all the way back to your school days in Lyon, to the startups, and to what you're doing today at Agave Partner Capital. And we'll jump in from there. And then one thing about you that nobody would know.
All right. I don't know about that, but yeah, thanks a lot. So back to Lyon. Wow, that's a while ago. I graduated as a computer scientist in France, as everybody will hear from my accent. Actually, after that, I went on my military service that was still required at the time per French law. But you could do that as a civil servant for French embassies or French companies around the world. And that led me to go to Cairo, Egypt, where I worked for 18 months on educative programs around French, of course. As a computer scientist, I was very happy to work on very innovative online programs for Egyptian teachers teaching French, which back in the mid-late 90s was very innovative. So it was a fantastic experience. I mention it because it was very formative for me to spend so much time in such a different, such foreign country from a variety of reasons. That I really appreciated, and I was really instrumental in my career, I think. At the end of this, I was actually called by a friend of mine. We did our studies together. We had just arrived in San Francisco, and he called me pretty much out of the blue, saying, "Hey, Jacques, I'm in San Francisco. I've just started a company. We're doing some amazing thing. You'll love it. Come on board, etc." And I was not prepared for this. As a computer scientist, going to Silicon Valley was a dream. So, he offered me to pay for my flight ticket to come visit him. So I said, okay, there's nothing to lose. So I came there with my small suitcase to check it out. And almost 25 years later, I'm still in San Francisco area. So that's how it started. We started this company called Untitled. And it was started back in 1998, end of 98. I joined end of 99, initially as a software engineer. And then very quickly, we had a first client. We are not ready for that. We were developing a lot of technologies where, a bunch of nerds writing code, and nobody from any business or sales experience. And then a client, we did a lot of open source projects, so we became pretty visible online, and some companies were starting pinging us about those technologies and what they mean, how to use them, etc. And then we got a client willing to pay us to get services, and so one of us had to go check it out and help that customer, and that was me. And that's how I moved from software development to the business side, where I actually spent most of my career. So we developed that company together. It grew pretty significantly. You can imagine that, being started in 2000, we went through a lot of ups and downs. We went through the dot-com crash, 9/11, resuming businesses after that, even the financial crisis that was not as extreme, but still in 2007, 2008, did many rounds of financing, raised quite a bit of capital through history, and developed the business internationally. In 2012, we had 1,500 clients in 65 countries. I was managing all the business side. So sales, technical support, etc., growing pretty well, and starting to negotiate really significant contracts with really big companies. And the board found that at the time it was probably the right time to do an exit. They'd been supported the company for 13 years at that point in time, and some for a very long time. Some investors were more recently, of course, at board, and they thought it was a good time to leverage those discussions and those partnerships to negotiate an exit. It was less interesting for us. We had been with the company for 12, 13 years. We had very small percentages of the shareholding, given that we've been diluted many, many times. So it was not very exciting to do that. So we left the company more or less willingly and started a new company that we called actually a Stoic, in reference to the Stoic philosophy, that tells you that when things don't go your way, and it's not in your control, you can just live through it and learn the good out of it and try to make better from it. So I can make a pause here if you have some questions, but that's how we left our first company and started our second company. We were in 2012 then, and of course it was a very different story than when we started our first company, because we had 12 years of experience. We had raised funding before. We had developed relationships, especially in Silicon Valley. We knew what it meant to do software. So it was a very, very different story. So we had no problem getting capital very quickly, hiring the best resources at the time, having the right processes and methodologies to develop software. And we worked on ideas that came to us through our experience very, very quickly. So bootstrapping and finding what we wanted to do was much, much, much easier the second time, given the experience we had from the first time. And so we started working on an idea of bringing simple tools. The ideas we had, really, Jeffrey, was that as computer scientists, we found that computer scientists had done a pretty bad job at really supporting business people. We've spent, businesses have spent enormous amount of money in IT. But at the end of the day, does it really help them? Of course it does. There are a lot of things, nothing we couldn't do without those systems, but especially big companies, IT departments have become enormous, really hard to manage, and the value for the business is not so always obvious. So, and we thought there was a contradiction here, because automation, computer science should be there to really make your life easier, to automate things and to let you focus on the good things and not get in the way, right? So we thought that, we didn't quite, as computer scientists, we didn't quite achieve on that promise of really making the world much better and easier to manage for business, not having to think about a lot of things they don't want to spend time on. And so we worked around those ideas of bringing the best of what computers could bring, but making it really accessible to business people with removing lots of the struggles that you have in IT systems. And we came up with online solutions targeting business users, doing very sophisticated things. And we played with quite a few people. We did something pretty innovative at the time. Again, it was in early 2013. We actually ran a Kickstarter campaign, and not to raise capital or to sell a product, as most of those campaigns were. And as a software company, we had not found any software company doing that outside of gaming era, certainly not for business. But our goal was actually to get access to an early adopters community that wanted to be very early on involved in our project, and willing to prove so by actually giving us a little bit of money to put some skin in the game. As I mentioned earlier, we had done a lot of open source projects. So we had done a lot of projects involving people who were involved in those projects, but at no cost to them. It has a lot of benefits, but also a lot of inconvenience. You get a lot of noise, you get a lot of people who are involved just because it's free, and not because they're really, involved personally into it. And one way to get people really personally involved is to ask them to put their own money into it. So we didn't ask for much, Kickstarter, anybody can put any amount of money they want. Some people just put $10 in there. Some people put a few $1,000s. But we raised, I believe, $60,000 from about 300 people. And that gave us a committee of 300 paying users for a product that didn't exist yet, and spending the remaining of the year working with us to build that product together. That was a fascinating, fantastic experience. We built a fantastic technology, demonstrating the ability to perform some typical functions you do in Excel, but imagine Excel with billions of lines of rows in your spreadsheet. I'm not even talking, hundreds of thousands, but billions of them, and doing it as naturally, as fast as you're doing it in Excel when you have, just a few hundreds of lines. And I was, unbelievable, never seen before at the time. And we thought about, who could use such a technology to process so much computing capacity on so much data at the time. And we talked to different people we think would be good candidates, in particular banks. And they were very receptive. And we were able to very quickly sign contracts with very big banks. And those paid us to finish building a product on the promise that we could help their users, who are bankers, traders, risk managers, people like that, perform the same type of computation they do in Excel, but on much, much larger data sets. And we delivered on that promise with a very impressive product. Of course, I initially worked back on the engineering side of it, developing some of the product. And then once we had that working and involving customers, then I shifted hat to focus on the delivery side to customers and acquiring customer base and delivering projects. And of course, hiring the team to do that. And so we very quickly had quite a few engagements, very exciting stuff. And something very interesting happened then. The customers, big banks, told us, because we were showing impressive performance, we were basically 1,000 times faster than any competition compared to any tools that banks had tried. And believe me, bankers try a lot of tools, homemade and elsewhere, to get the advantage on their competition. And so they tried a lot of things, but we were much, much, much faster. And for a bank, being able to process information to give you some ideas of where the market can go, what risk you're taking, 1,000 times faster is huge. It's really existential. So they were fascinated by that. That's why we could sign interesting engagement so quickly and so interesting. But then they told us, and that's the fascinating thing, is that for them, speed was of the essence. And if we could go even 10 times, 100 times, another 1,000 times faster, they would always have money to spend to go faster and computing more data ever faster. And then we said, well, that's interesting. We'd love, but, we're trying to do some very innovating stuff in software. I don't want to go into the technical details, but could if necessary. But I was pretty extreme on that path and said, we don't see how we can go 10 times faster, maybe 2 times, 3 times, but not more than that. At least on existing hardware architecture with standard computers. We're using standard, PCs, either on desks or in data centers, and that was out of our control. But in our software, we had developed some specific understanding of the type of computation that we are doing and what was expensive in processing big data sets in that manner. And we thought that, if we had computers better designed for that kind of computation we do, designed for big data sets, maybe we could do faster. I said, well, that's very interesting. We'd love you to work on that. So we negotiated a contract where they basically paid us for R&D, a 6-month contract, to think about a different type of hardware architecture that could enable such a speed on big data sets. And in fact, after 6 months, we found something very interesting, some really good ideas. We talked to a hardware specialist. As computer scientists, we had a good understanding of hardware conceptually, but not any experiments actually building or developing very low-level technology. So we talked to people who had that expertise, worked with them, and defined an idea and something to prove it, and showing that, we could probably do something very interesting. And then we created a new company because, we were still a young software company. Adding hardware on top of very advanced software is probably not the best advice for an entrepreneur, and maybe we'll talk about that later on. So we created a new company called Fermat, and then as my partner continued on developing Stoic, I took over the management of Fermat to take it off the ground. So building the team, getting the roadmap secured, getting a first version, getting first clients and partners to work on, bringing the right co-founders to make it work, and did that for some time. And then we are then in 2017. So I had been developing startup companies for almost 20 years. And now at the Rim with my co-founders of a new young companies that was now going to market and needed to grow. And I felt like I needed to do something a little bit different. I was not so excited anymore to go again into 5 to 10 years of development of a third company. I had done that. I'd been there. And really what changed my mind is, which can be interesting for entrepreneurs listening to us, is that when you're running your startup company, you're extremely focused and you see the world entirely through the lenses of your company, and everything else disappear. You have no idea whatsoever, and you don't want to spend any of your brain cells thinking about other fields that are remote to you. Everything that's connected, of course, you want to follow your competition, your market, and technologies and innovation around your space, and you become an expert in those. But anything else that goes beyond, you have no idea what's going on, and you don't have time for it. And I found that, after almost 20 years, a bit frustrating that I knew so much about certain field where I focused my energy and my intellect, and know nothing about everything else that was going on in the world. And I was becoming a little bit frustrating. I was getting really thirsty to hear about other entrepreneurs and their ideas and what they're doing and what are the problems they're facing and how they're solving them. And I wanted to basically share my experience in developing startup companies with entrepreneurs that were starting their own journeys, doing different things. And I saw it as an exchange. They would educate me on what's going on in the world, and I would help them, avoiding some of the loopholes and challenges and mistakes that you make as an entrepreneur. And believe me, we've made a lot of mistakes as entrepreneurs, learning from them, but there are some that are better to avoid when you know upfront about them. So I decided to shift gears a little bit. Took a little bit of time to find the right way of doing that, starting a little bit of a freelance business to talk to companies and found a lot of interested entrepreneurs willing to work with me. Until I met my partner today, his name is Robert Troy, who's also a former entrepreneur, but mostly a venture capitalist and investment banker. And he was running Agave Partners, which at the time was an investment bank. And what we were doing is helping high-tech companies grow internationally by developing strategic partnerships with bigger companies that are already established in the business, which is one way companies can really accelerate their growth, because building your own global sales and marketing arm can be very challenging, can take a lot of time, a lot of capital, and you have to go against established competitions that is already has a lot of money and ways to win you on the business. So it's very hard to do, and it can be sometimes best for companies to be connected with a company that's already in the market, already has the customer relationship, already has the support and sales and marketing resources to access the market. So we are facilitating that. The best way to do that, and again, is to have the bigger company putting some skin in the game. So there's always a financial transaction involved. It can take different shapes. It can be an investment, it can be an outright acquisition, it can be joint venture. It can be staged on a multi-year program where eventually the bigger company will acquire the smaller ones, but not right away. And we were advising companies on their strategy to attract the best partner for them, to have the right traction to build what's really interest of developing the company. So we did a lot of transactions like that, taking mandates from the high-tech company to access global markets. And we did a lot of that in China, actually, because in those years, it's changed a little bit in the past few years, but China was, of course, a very fast-growing market, a huge market, becoming, the second, if not the first market for certain areas. Certainly today, the first market for many high-tech areas. So not a market that, entrepreneurs today could ignore. But accessing it is very difficult for Western companies. They don't have the skills, the knowledge, the expertise, and we were bringing that capacity. So we took quite a few companies to China very successfully in the form of JV, investment and acquisitions. And then we had another frustration, which is that in that process, we were creating a lot of value for the companies we were representing. But most of the value would come after that transactions takes place, thanks to that transaction. And we were only interested, of course, in that transaction, which is nice, but it's a little bit frustrating because especially as former entrepreneurs, we kind of want to see what the company does after it signed those contracts and continue supporting it. But we couldn't do that as an investment banker. And that's what took us to venture capitalism, which was natural for my partner because he had been a VC before, less for me because I had never been a VC before. I've worked a lot with VCs, obviously, but always from the other side. And that was quite of a challenge for me to adapt to that. But I had a great mentor with my partner. And for the past year and a half, we've been focused exclusively on venture capital. We do it in a slightly non-traditional way, even though that's becoming more and more common. Instead of having a whole fund, and then we decide how to invest money from that fund in different opportunities along the way. We kind of do the opposite. We do what are called SPVs, which means special purpose investment vehicles. And we raise funds to invest in one specific round of financing. So each time we spent a lot of time sourcing deals, obviously educating ourselves on the opportunity, qualifying them. And when we convince ourselves, that would be a great opportunity, then we establish a fund, a small fund, and we raise money for that fund only to participate in that round of financing. That allows us to look at many more companies, not being dependent on the strategy of a whole fund. We are completely free to do what we want from a deal to another, as long as we manage, of course, to raise the funds to invest. And of course, it enables us to access investors and discuss with them in the context of a very specific deal, which is a different discussion than when you raise a traditional fund. It also allows us to participate in later stage companies because we found that based on our experience in development, our best value add is when companies need to grow, need to scale up. So they already have a product, they already have revenue, they already have clients, and it's about scaling up the business. And at that point, especially in the past few years, companies are typically, especially in Silicon Valley, pretty expensive. So the round of financing are pretty significant, the valuation are pretty significant. So if you want to participate, you need to build pretty significant tickets. So that allows us to participate into bigger round of financing with bigger participations than if we were to raise a traditional fund. So that's what we're doing. We are focusing, our main topic is the big topic of energy transition, which impacts everything in our world, in industries, from mobility to data centers to healthcare and whatnot. So it's really diverse in terms of industries, but it's all about the new technologies that help us shift the way we live. To have a bigger impact on the environment, on society, on our life, on our health, etc. That's what we're really excited about. That's the kind of companies we focus on.
Love it, Jacques. That's amazing. That was a great dialogue, and now we're going to try to dive into some of this. I wanted to share, though, one thing about you that no one would know. Then we're going to dive into all of this.
There are not many things nobody know about me because I'm pretty public and open what I do, etc. But something pretty cool that I've done in the years I was in Egypt. With a bunch of friends, we spent 3 days hiking in Sinai. And you have to understand that Egypt at the time, it's the case as well today, even though a lot of things happen in between, is a military country. It's not an open country. The whole country is military, so everything is protected by the army. And even maps were forbidden because maps is military secrets. So interestingly, we had a map, but it was a map that went back to the 60s, late 60s, when Sinai was part of Israel. So we had an Israeli map from the late 60s to find our way in the middle of Sinai desert. And we were there for 3 days. And a lot of interesting things happened. One is that at some point, we had actually two maps, or one recto and verso. They're very old, we couldn't see very well on them. And after a day and a half, we didn't realize that the second map was actually on a different scale. And all the distances were actually twice bigger than we thought we were compared to the first map. So a lot of crazy things happened during that trip in a country where there was no GPS, no cell phone, no nothing, and you don't want to be completely lost because you could really die there. So it was very eventful, but it was an amazing experience.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool story. And I'm a huge fan of Egypt. I did spend some time not too long ago traveling through there, and there's so many amazing areas to visit. And I guess doing it with a 1960s map would really add a little extra flavor into it. So that's pretty cool. Well, we're going to jump back a few things and back to some earlier kind of the startup side that you worked in. One that really interested me is the business that you're, of course, building out these billion lines of Excel side. One of our investors, his name is Rene Pardo, and actually Rene was the one that created the spreadsheet digitally back in the 1960s. So I think he sold it. I'm guessing he must have sold it at some point to Microsoft or whoever picked that up. But I thought that was pretty cool because I saw a video of him the other day talking about that. So it's a pretty fascinating space and pretty cool on obviously what you did. So, but when you were putting this all together and you were going in it from the development side and switching over to the product side, how did you find that transition went? And did you find yourself, you said you've been obviously now moved to and been from Cairo to now being in San Francisco for a good, 30 years. When you transitioned over to the business side, did you miss coding? Do you miss that side of business? Because it is an element, but what do you find you're more comfortable in? And what did you really gain from that switch? Did you find that it's just allowed you to better see into what developers are working for and what they see on their side versus what you're looking at, and what are some of the learnings that you got from that transition?
Yeah, that was very interesting. Yes, there was sometimes some frustration, and still today, every once in a while, I feel myself like, coding is fun, and I like to do something. But as time goes, you lose your skills, and I get a more and more terrible developer. Back in those days, two things. One is that I was overwhelmingly excited about going outside of my cubicle and spending time with real people talking about their problems and how IT could deliver them solutions. And it was a surprise to me because I was more of a shy person. I was very comfortable in my cubicle with my computer and happy not having to talk to too many people. So I had to go, outside of my zone of comfort. But I was surprised of what I discovered and how fun it was to do that. So that completely, and I tend to be more of an optimistic and positive person and like to see what I appreciate in new experiences and forget about the rest. So that was really what I retain most from that experience. It was not also completely all or nothing in terms of development skills. Because obviously, initially, when working with those clients, there was a lot of technical work involved and work that we had no resources to do, that the clients could not do because they didn't have the knowledge of the technology. So I was essentially, for initially at least, I was essentially an outsourced developer for clients doing the connection between our technologies, our engineers, and the client. So I was, really in between the two worlds, and I loved being in that position. And so it was a smooth transition, and until we hired a first salesperson. Was an amazing person. He was one of the top salespeople on the West. I'd worked with a really big company like Oracle and SAP, and I've been awarded for his success for those companies in the Bay Area. And I went around the world with him, pitch our product, competing against others, doing proof of concept, etc. And I saw him in action, and I was really impressed by how a salesperson can pitch and convince others, and read how clients perceive our presentations, our offering in a competitive environment, and take advantage of it to best position our product. That was fascinating, and that's over a period of 2 years how I learned the business and sales skills that I didn't have from education. So the transition was relatively smooth because it was initially still a very technical job, and it just became more business oriented with the facilitation of a salesperson who basically became a mentor for me as I learned those skills.
Oh, I love that. And it's interesting because I also did the same in the early 2000s, transition from being a developer to on the business side. And I remember one person asked me one time, they said, do you like it better? And I liked actually the development side better, I won't lie, because I enjoyed the zoning out and working for days on problems. But the difference is that a problem on tech, I would say, can take you anywhere from 1 to 3 to 5 days to solve a problem. But on business, I felt like you could solve it in a matter of minutes or moments. It was never elongated. It was always something you could solve quickly. So I think the difference for me is that on the code side, it took a lot longer to fix things than it did on the business side. So I just enjoyed the transition that I could solve things quicker and be more productive than I felt where I was days on code. So I guess as you started to progress, you also mentioned a lot of great parts here where in your transition, everybody was a mentor to you. So you mentored into capital or into venture. You ventured into, mentored into on the business side. So there's always this mentoring part that's really driven and helped you progress forward. And to almost go back a little bit more again, but it's during that time where you mentioned that there was 3 major issues that you kind of went through as a business. And the reason I bring this up is because today people are going through COVID, and you had to manage through, as you mentioned, 9/11, .com bust, and then the financial crisis. Can you share a little bit about maybe, 1, 2, 3 points on what you had to go through in order to balance these out? Because you have ups and downs normally in business, but you don't exactly have an entire economy crash in .com. And then, of course, 9/11, you had the same thing, which was pretty much almost identical to .com crash. And then the financial crisis was a little bit different. I think that was just more of a slower recession. But what were a couple of points that really stood out? And how did you guys prepare yourselves for the next one so that it didn't occur again, or at least that you were in a better position for it?
Yeah, actually, I quickly use what you just said. That was the biggest lesson, is to learn to be prepared for the next thing that's going to hit you and when you don't expect it. And that's another mentor who's been an investor in all 3 of our companies and business angel, who told us that lesson that in business, especially when you're a startup, even if you do the best job and you do everything right, which almost never happens, something is going to hit you 6 months down the road. And what are you doing to be ready for it? And it's really hard to think about that because you don't have time for that when you're in startup. It's like being a cyclist and looking just in front of you and making sure not going to hit a small gravel on the road that could take you off road. But you don't have the luxury of bigger companies to think strategy and inertia of economy and stuff like that. But in reality, those things happen as well. There's a lot of things that move around you that you have no control of. Those are huge forces, and they're going to catch up with you one day or another. So what do you do to be prepared for that? And that's a very big challenge that I think all entrepreneurs have to face all of the time. And maybe we'll get back to that. But to go back to your questions and those big challenges, the challenge there, and then maybe I'll have a small digression on COVID crisis. But the key there was about financing, really. Obviously, as a company doing big projects, we were burning cash every month. So we were dependent on venture capital to continue developing the company. We wanted to grow fast. We were pushed by our investors to grow fast. It's all about capturing the market as quickly as possible. So you're not, taking money from venture capital to let it sit in the bank. You're spending it, and you're spending as quickly as possible to go as fast as possible. And the problem is that when a crisis hit like this, all of a sudden you don't have the financial resources to maybe survive that crisis. So what happens there, the double edge or the double problems we face is that one, you're running out of capital, but two, your investors are also running out of capital. The venture capitalists you would go normally to when you need capital are no longer picking the phone. They no longer have any cash. In fact, they're in crisis mode. They're closing down their portfolio companies. Our main investor that had over 100 companies under its portfolio closed every single of its companies and timeframe except ours. We're the single company that didn't close at the time. For that venture capital group. That's a big VC in Silicon Valley that's still operating today. So that was very brutal. Companies were closing, VC funds were closing. Those who were not closing had no money whatsoever. If they had, they were keeping it for the few top companies they had and that they thought would be able to survive the crisis. So it was really, really hard. And in fact, we found ourselves with less than 2 weeks of cash left. One of our founder had an exit before from a previous company and had a little bit of money on the side and took on his own money to pay for an extra week so we could cover employees' salary and not lay off any people to give us an extra week. But basically had 3 weeks to find money or shut down the company. And we had talked to every VCs we knew about, every banks we could think about to get some loans, etc. We're running out of option. There was one investor, one angel that was very interested to work with her for a long time. But our board was not very keen on having us working with him for whatever reasons we never fully understood. And we thought, well, this guy, he always wanted to invest, and maybe he can do something. And we actually had to spend a bit of time convincing the board. They were against us doing that. We said, but I don't know what else to do. And we went there, and after some effort to convince the board to do that, and he put some money, and he put the money within a few days, and that really saved the company. But I was really, we are really at the end of the rope. It could have gone either way, and we were lucky that it worked pretty well. And that was the hardest time we had for the company right at that time. But we managed to get out very successfully. So that was a very positive. So that's what happened in those days. You mentioned COVID, an interesting things because everybody seem to be discovering what it's like to work from home. But all the companies have done, we hired people globally, tech people the best we could. We didn't care where they were located. So most of our employees were working from home. And one of the skills we developed was how do you manage companies where all of your employees are remote? They almost never meet, or very few of them. We always had an headquarters with some core, the management and some local people be there. But sometimes even key managers were not at headquarters. We're in a very remote area. So we always had from the get-go to manage teams that were distributed, that rely on their own home infrastructure to work with us. using all kind of tools. Zoom didn't invent a web conference. It's just a better tool, easier tool to do it, but it was possible even in the early 2000s. And it turns out that it was a great skill because when COVID hits and you have to adapt to that, well, you've already done it. And that's back to that what you were saying earlier about how do you do when something like that happens, when COVID happens. How are you equipped? And it can be very, very hard if you don't have the right process, the right methodology to be agile enough to adapt to the circumstances. It can be a life or death issue.
For sure, and I guess if you tie in the agility part or being agile, I think that you guys were able to obviously meet that, and obviously this was heavily influenced by capital. How would you recommend companies start to protect themselves? Is that looking at their runway a lot tighter, and instead of being profitable in 18 months, they try to keep their profitability levels anywhere between, say, 5 and 6 months, so that this way, if something does happen, they're not far off from reducing and getting to break even, so they're not overburning, or that they've already been planning their next raise? What kind of key insights can you share that would prevent them from being down to week 2 or down to week 3 without any capital?
Yeah, it's a very hard judgment call to make because being too safe is also not a good option. That means slowing things down. And if you slow down and you have a good opportunity, the competition will take advantage of it. So you want to go fast. You want to mitigate risks, but being too safe is taking a risk, right? So you also have to balance that, and that's a very, very difficult thing to challenge. There's no silver bullet answer to that. The one thing I can say is that economy typically goes in cycles. There are some boom years and some really tough years. It looks like we're entering a difficult time, and numbers for the first quarters are showing a big decrease in capital investment. There is some inertia in the system, so it's not going to happen right away. But it might be time to think about buckling up for some companies. So if you can try to get a sense of how those economic cycles are evolving. And then that in a bullish market, it's probably a good idea to spend, and capital is easy to get and it's cheap to get, so you want to go as fast as possible. But when you see signs that things are changing, and nobody can predict the future, so you can be wrong on those signs, and that can be a problem. But when you see those, then you want to maybe have a bigger cushion and be careful of what you do. One rule of thumb that I learned from another mentor who's a business angel and invested our companies very early on, is that when you get cash on the table from investors, take the money. And sometimes we want to optimize too much, avoiding dilution, not getting too much capital, etc. And there are plenty of examples of people who are massively successful and protecting the interest that way. So that's by no means saying you should not do this. But one thing that can sometimes make your life easier, back to the problems we're talking about, is that when you have money, when you have people willing to put money, take the money, even if it's mean taking more money that you really need. That extra money can make the difference between you surviving or not surviving the next crisis.
Well, that's some very valuable advice. And sometimes we look too much at wanting to have the right investor in versus having investors in that can help support you regardless, and just being able to utilize them better instead of looking at them that they're just bad money or not the right capital. All capital is good. You just have to figure out how to utilize it and work with the people that are putting it in. But that's great advice. Well, there's a few other things that I would love to unpack, but due to the time, we're going to kind of shift things a little bit. We're probably going to have to do a number 2 follow-up interview because, again, lots of great stuff on all the things you've done, and tremendous background, of course, and working in startups and now investing. But maybe I will ask one more question just for the timing side, because I want to break through all of the myths and the BS and all this other stuff that comes from what do later stage VCs really look for? What do they need in order to make an investment? So let's just say real quickly, I'm a Series A company moving into Series B. You're going to get ready to invest. You have an interest somewhere in that Series B, C area. What things do a startup need to be ready for to be able to have you step at the table and make that large investment that's going to help them move their business forward? Maybe 2 or 3 points that you think are going to help them clearly understand better what they need to be doing.
Yeah, actually there's 4. So there are 4 pillars for us we look at that, I think everybody will tell you about, but we look at all 4 very deeply and we want to have great answers to them. And by great answers, it doesn't mean that you're perfect. We expect every company to have some weaknesses. But what we don't like is companies who don't know their weaknesses or are in denial of their weaknesses or hide their weaknesses or try to make too much of a marketing work in trying to paint a better picture than it really is. That's we normally find it, and that impacts the trust we have in the team when we see that. So the 4 pillars for us are in no specific order because they are equally important. But maybe the last one is the most important. One is the market. What's your market? What's the market what's your market opportunity? How do you differentiate? What's the competitive landscape, etc. And you don't have to be the best one. There are so many examples where the ultimate winner was the number 2 or the number 3. It might even be a rule that you don't want to be number 1, given how often that happens. So you don't have to be the best, but you have to know where you are, what you're playing with, what are your strengths and weaknesses, and how that plays out. We need to have a clear picture on that. The second one is the product and technology. What's your product? How is it differentiated? What's really unique about it? Where's your IP? How do you defend it? That's, of course, typically where we start. Okay, we usually start with that. If we don't see that very quickly, we pass. We are not interested in companies that don't have a clear, unique value that nobody else, is apparently bringing. A third thing, obviously, that's very important is the finance at that stage. You are in operation. What's the health of your finances? What's your business plan? How is it built? What are the assumptions behind them? Do they make sense? Are you in control of them? What happens if they don't go the way you expect? And we go very deep into analyzing those financial models. It's not unusual for us to rebuild our own model before we invest, to, from our perspective, see if it can really work and operate regardless of how it's presented by the company. Last, and I think not least, but probably the most important is the team, is the people. Because at the end, and that's my experience in everything, if you try to summarize everything we talked about today, Jeffrey, I think that's really the big lesson. It's all about people. Everything you do, whether it's the coding, the business side, selling, raising capital, developing company, inventing new technologies. At the end, it's we're people. We work together. We do that for each other, and we depend on each other. And it's all about the people. So the quality of the executing team, who they are, do they have what it takes to take the company to the next level? If they don't, are they aware of it? And are they willing to hire the right resources that are going to make the difference? Or are they in denial? Are they going to be obstructive to hire the right talent that could really make the difference? Those are essential things that we look into it. So we look at all of those things. They're all extremely important. And we don't invest if we don't have good answers to all of those 4 things. And again, a good answer doesn't mean that the company has nailed it, but it means that we know what the challenges are. We know that there is a way to address them, and we're confident the company can take the right decisions to address those risks.
I love it. Those are 4 great points. And from that, I'm going to say every investor should look at this, and startups should really focus on this, especially when they start to get to that Series A. Come up with clean books, understand your model, understand your markets, and build great people into what you're doing, because that's what's going to help you grow and scale quite quickly, is having the right people running the right lines of business to help you grow. So again, Jacques, great value, great points. Thank you for that. We're going to transition now into kind of storytelling time, but Maybe there's you can share a story about in your past, either through your own experience or through others that you work with. Any companies that you can share that really took an understanding to what it takes to be an entrepreneur. She or he went really above and beyond, and you thought they were going to fail, or you thought it wasn't going to work out, and you made the investment, and they just took off like a rocket ship. And you're proud of that entrepreneur. Is there a story that kind of lines up to that ideal?
Well, there are many amazing entrepreneurs, and I get to meet some every day. Just a few hours ago, because still early in California, I was a jury at a pitch day where we listened to a selection of 18 entrepreneurs presenting their projects. A couple were not that good, but the most majority of them were very impressive. I also had a chance to attend to your OPN last pitch session. I think you had 46 companies there. It's amazing the diversity of people, of ideas, of projects, of problems they think about and they solve. So I continue to be even though I've been doing that for a long time, I'm still surprised every day to meet entrepreneurs with fascinating ideas and new things. So it's hard to take one. I would think the first thing that came to my mind when you asked the question is actually the latest investment we've made. It's a company called IR Labs. It's really deep technology. They had 10 years of research, mostly at MIT and also at Berkeley. They have over 100 patents, doing very, very extremely technical things that combine physics and computer technology and optics, because there are photoelectronics in there. It's massively complex. And we met them over 4 years ago. They were just coming back out of their startup accelerator. And that was a 1-year program where, they were scientists from their lab going through that program to become a company, an entrepreneur. And we met one of the co-founder there who was running the company at the time. Fantastic individual on top of the technology with great ambition, but in a market that's phenomenally complex and impossible to get into. It was too early for us. It was a Series A at the time. We couldn't invest, but she used the money to hire a CEO, which is always something really hard. When you're founder of such a big, complex company for such a long time, and hiring a professional CEO to take over, and you will lose control on your baby. That's a very, very hard thing to do. A lot of entrepreneurs fail to do that, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And she hired a fantastic CEO. Who's really a best in class. He came from Intel and he's really, really solid guy who brought his own team of professional CFO and COO and whatnot. And that's, completely took the company to the next level. It takes courage to do that. And it doesn't always work. I've had some negative experience hiring professional CEO that really don't understand the business and the company and destroy it. But that was a massive success. And we this year invested into their Series C. We're very proud of that and happy of that. And that's a good example of an entrepreneur that worked really hard, was extremely talented, extremely smart, has a lot of skills, but understood that the best way for a company to succeed was to bring even better person that she is. And that's maybe the best quality you can hope from, and that's very hard from an entrepreneur, is you want people to hire people who are better than they are. And a lot of people are not comfortable. It's more comfortable to hire people who are not as good as you are because you can control them and you know better than they do. But that's typically a recipe for failure. You want to hire the best people and you want to hire people who are better than you are, who are going to challenge you every step on the way. But of course, you have to trust them. You have to trust that they're challenging you for the good cause, not to play politics or go in a different direction.
I love it. Great story, and I love hearing a story that has some change to it and has somebody succeed, but also bring in a strong team above them. I've seen that a few times, and you're right. Not always, it doesn't always work, but in this case, I think strategically they found the right fit, and they're now taking off like a rocket ship, and hopefully they have continued success. But it sounds like the founder really understood the product, the market, and the best fit for them to move forward. So great story.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to jump into rapid fire questions. So the way this works, business and personal. Business side, pick one or the other, coming from obviously the investor lens. So we'll get started. Ready?
All right. Yeah.
Okay. Founder or co-founder?
Founder.
Unicorn or a 4-year 10x exit?
Unicorn.
Tech or CPG?
Tech.
NFT or Web 3.0?
Web 3.0.
AI or blockchain?
AI.
First-time founder or second, third-time founder?
Second, third-time founder.
First money in or Series A?
Well, Series B or C.
Fair enough, yes. Board seat or observer seat?
Board seat.
Safe or convertible note?
Safe.
Lead or follow?
Lead.
Equity or interest payments?
Equity.
Favorite part of investing?
Is that a binary question?
Correct. Yes, you can throw some dialogue behind it.
Say again, favorite part of investing? This question. Working with entrepreneurs on strategy.
Okay. Number of companies invested per year?
Sorry, say again, I got a distraction.
Number of companies invested per year?
5.
Preferred terms?
Nothing special, standard, industry standard.
You mentioned the verticals of focus, but one last time, just the verticals that you guys focus on for investments?
Everything around energy transition.
2 qualities a startup needs to stand out for you guys.
Again, being really round around the edges, showing that they understand the challenges, the risks, and have good plans about all of those.
Love it. Good plans are key.
Yeah.
First, personal questions. All right. Book or movie?
A book.
Superman or Batman?
Batman.
Restaurant or picnic?
Restaurant.
5 minutes with Bezos or Oprah?
Oprah.
Mountain or beach?
Mountain.
Bike or run?
Bike.
Big Mac or chicken McNuggets?
Big Mac.
Trophy or money?
Money.
Beer or wine?
Beer.
Camera or mobile phone?
Mobile phone.
King or rich?
Rich.
Concert or amusement park?
Concert.
Fortune cookie or birthday cake?
Birthday cake.
TED Talk or book reading?
Book reading.
Most famous person that pops in your mind?
Obama.
Favorite book?
Dune.
Ooh, I don't know that one.
Dune, yeah, maybe it's my accent. D-U-N-E. Dune.
Oh, Dune. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's awesome. That's great. All right. Fair enough. That's a good one. Okay. Favorite movie and what character would you play in the movie?
Favorite movie, Once Upon a Time in America. And what characters? All characters have terrible lives, so there's no good character in that. But probably Robert De Niro as the most interesting and closer character, even though he's a failure in the movie.
Okay, I gotta watch that. I can't remember if I've seen it or not. Okay,
It's a fantastic movie. Long movie. Take the long edition. It's 3 hours and a half.
Okay, I'll do that. All right, next question. First brand that pops in your mind.
Nike.
Okay. Favorite sports team?
Really, I don't have any. I have no idea.
Okay, that's okay. We won't hold that one against you. Not everybody's a sports watcher. I will say from the France side of things, they do have a great football club. I did watch a few of the games there and a big fan. So Paris Saint-Germain.
All right.
Favorite app you're using on your mobile phone?
Medium.
Medium. Oh yeah, that's good. Very good for reading. Love it.
Yep.
We're getting close. What is the meaning of success to you?
Making an impact.
I like that. Making an impact. Brilliant. What is your superpower?
Listening.
I would concur that you have a very strong listening from my learning experience, but I also think you have a very good way of breaking between different sides of the business, which means that very few people can understand tech and understand the philosophies and drive of business. So I would say you're very good at interpreting multiple languages and helping people get to the end result, which was to your point about helping people with strategy. I think when you can understand really how code works and how the business works off of that, I think that really does help you kind of scale a business and better understand the environment you're in as well.
Yeah, thanks. That's a better answer. I take that.
Perfect. Well, either way, I think, Jacques, we're at our time. We blasted through all of that. It's been amazing to get to dive in and learn more about yourself today. And the way we like to end our show is that we want to give you the last word, and we would love for you to share any insights to the community, from the investors to the startups, anything that you want to share that can really help them move their business forward. I turn it over to you. But again, thank you very much for all your time today.
Well, thanks a lot. I had a great time as well. We really love working with entrepreneurs. For us, it's of course about making money, but just not that. We also want to bring value, helping companies grow and have an impact. These are really the things that matter the most for us. And as we talked about, if there's one thing I learned, and it's a paradox, but as an entrepreneur, you want to be ready for what you cannot be ready for. Be ready for the unpredictable. And it's a mission impossible, but that's the mission that you have as an entrepreneur.
I love that line. Mission impossible. Be ready for the unknowns. Again, Jacques, thank you very much for your day.
Thank you,
time
Jeffrey.
Today. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Okay, that was fantastic. Jacques really opened a lot up there, shared a lot of great details around how he got into this space, the startups that he worked on, and all the great things that he did. And I think that he really, even though he break down what it was taking to be a VC and coming in at a Series C, I think a lot of the things that they look for are the same things that we have to look for at every stage. And that is, on the market side, where are they fitting in on the market side, sharing and showing their weaknesses. On the product tech, how great that is. Can they defend their IP? On the finance, how healthy is the financial side of their business? And then the biggest number one that you look at from day one, which is going to change all the way through to Series C, which is the team, and how strong is that team, and how well are they going to be able to adapt and grow and be that driver behind the scaling of your business. Again, lots of great details. Thank you again for all of that. And wow, what a change when you've got to go through 3 global crises in the world to keep your business running. So great stories again from that. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you enjoyed the conversation, please feel free to share with your friends or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and or Stitcher. Your support and comments are truly appreciated. You can also check us out at supportersfund.com, or for startup events, visit opn.ninja. Thank you and have a fantastic day.